Today, we're diving into what is, without a doubt, the single most important process for all life on Earth. Seriously. It is the engine that powers our entire world, this incredible planetary-scale magic trick that turns plain old sunlight and air into the energy for, well, pretty much everything that lives.
Okay, so to get us started, let me ask you a question. What could you, a massive 10-ton tree, and say a Tyrannosaurus rex from 65 million years ago possibly have in common? Sounds like a pretty random bunch, right?
Well, here's the mind-blowing answer. Every single bit of energy in your body right now, the energy that built that giant tree from a tiny seed, and the energy that let that T-Rex hunt, it all came from one place, the sun.
And the reason that's possible is all thanks to this ancient and honestly beautiful process called photosynthesis. It's the mechanism that figured out how to capture the energy from sunlight and use it to build the very stuff of life itself.
So let's really get into the heart of this. We're often taught that plants get their food from the soil, right? But the reality is so much more amazing than that. They literally build themselves, and by doing that, the entire food web out of thin air.
Let's go back to that giant tree for a second. If you were to put it on a massive scale, where did all that stuff, all that wood, the leaves, the roots, where did all that mass actually come from? It's a question that really trips people up. Does it come from the dirt, from the water it drinks? Get this. The shocking truth is that the huge majority of that tree's weight is pulled straight out of the atmosphere. It's constructed atom by atom from the carbon in carbon dioxide. The plant is literally made of air, with sunlight as the construction crew's power source. Of course, we didn't always know this. Figuring this all out was this epic scientific detective story that took centuries to solve. It wasn't just one big aha moment, but a whole series of clever experiments that, piece by piece, revealed what was going on. It kind of started in the 1770s with Joseph Priestley, who noticed that plants could somehow fix air that a candle had burned up. A few years later, Jan Ingenhousz added a crucial detail. This only works in sunlight. Fast forward to the 1850s, and Julius von Sachs figures out what plants are making: glucose. And then, a huge piece of the puzzle in the 1940s, Cornelius van Niel showed that the oxygen plants give off comes from splitting water molecules, not from the carbon dioxide they take in.
And Priestley's experiment was just so elegant. Picture it. You put a candle in a sealed glass jar, and it quickly goes out. A mouse in there can't breathe. The air's damaged. But if you put a little mint plant in the jar with them, something amazing happens. The candle stays lit, and the mouse is totally fine. He realized plants were putting something back into the air that both fire and animals needed.
Okay, so where is all this chemistry happening? Let's zoom way, way in. It all goes down inside these microscopic green factories in a plant's cells called chloroplasts. And honestly, thinking of it as a factory is the perfect way to understand what's going on. And just like any good factory, this one has two main departments. The first is the power plant. This is where the light reactions happen. Its only job is to capture sunlight and store that energy in these tiny portable battery packs. Then you have the second department, the assembly line. This is where the carbon reactions, or the Calvin cycle, use those battery packs to build the final product, which is sugar.
All right, let's start where all the energy comes from, the power plant. This is all about the light reactions. This whole phase is about one thing: converting the raw energy of sunlight into a chemical form that the factory can actually use.
Now, the main process here has a really big, fancy name: photophosphorylation. But don't let that scare you. All it really means is using light to add a phosphate. It's just a technical term for how the plant makes ATP, which is one of those key battery packs that powers everything else.
So here's the play-by-play. Light hits these special pigments that act like tiny antennae, capturing the energy. That energy then does something incredible. It splits water molecules apart, which is what releases all the oxygen we breathe. The electrons freed from the water then get passed down a kind of power-generating chain, and all that energy is used to charge up our two battery packs, ATP and NADPH.
Okay, so the power plant is humming along, and our batteries are fully charged. Now we can head over to the assembly line. This is where the actual building happens. It's called the Calvin cycle, and it's going to use all that stored energy to make sugar from scratch.
And the story of how they figured this cycle out is just amazing science. A scientist named Melvin Calvin used radioactive carbon-14, a new technology back in the 40s, to tag carbon dioxide molecules. He could then follow that tag, step by step, to see exactly how the plant turned it into sugar. It was brilliant work, and he won a Nobel Prize for it.
The assembly line works in 3 main stages. First is fixation. An enzyme called rubisco, which is, by the way, the most common enzyme on the entire planet, reaches out and grabs a CO2 molecule right out of the air. Step 2 is reduction. This is where the factory cashes in those ATP and NADPH battery packs to transform the molecule into sugar. And finally, regeneration. A little more energy is used to rebuild the original molecule so the whole cycle can start over again.
And get this, to make just one single molecule of glucose, the plant's main food, this whole cycle has to spin 6 separate times, grabbing 6 molecules of CO2. It's a really reliable system. But it's not perfect. In fact, this standard process has a pretty big bug in it, a design flaw that can be super wasteful.
And that, right there, is where the story gets really cool. Because evolution is the ultimate tinkerer. It saw this flaw and came up with an upgrade. It built smarter, more efficient factories, especially for plants that have to live in really tough environments.
So what's the bug? Well, that super important enzyme, rubisco, sometimes gets confused. Especially when it's hot and dry, instead of grabbing carbon dioxide, it'll accidentally grab an oxygen molecule. This process, called photorespiration, is a total waste. It burns up energy and spits out CO2, all without making a single speck of sugar. It's a major drag on efficiency.
But of course, nature found a fix. A whole group of plants, including really important crops for us like corn and sugarcane, evolved a completely new operating system to deal with this. It's called the C4 pathway. And you can really see the difference here. Your standard C3 plants, like wheat and rice, do everything in one step and really suffer from that wasteful photorespiration in the heat. But these upgraded C4 plants, they use a 2-step process with a different enzyme up front that's way better at grabbing CO2. This lets them just thrive in hot conditions where C3 plants would really start to struggle.
And the way they do it is pure genius. C4 plants have a special leaf structure. It's called Cran's anatomy. They basically use one set of cells to capture CO2, and then they actively pump it into a different, protected set of inner cells. This creates a super high CO2 zone right where rubisco is working, which makes it almost impossible for it to make a mistake and grab oxygen. It's like adding a turbocharger to photosynthesis.
So what's the big takeaway here? Photosynthesis isn't just some chapter in a biology textbook. It is a blueprint for brilliant, sustainable engineering that's been refined for billions of years. It really leaves us with a huge question. If nature figured out how to build and power an entire planet using just light and air, what other incredible designs are we overlooking? And what's stopping us from learning to do the same?